Remember that feeling? That knot in your stomach, the gasp you couldn't hold back, the sheer disbelief at what you just witnessed? For many of us, that feeling is synonymous with one show, Breaking Bad. Even years after its explosive finale, it still holds a grip on our collective consciousness. But why? Why, in a world flooded with new content, do we keep coming back to the story of a chemistry teacher who decided to break bad? From its very first episode, Breaking Bad wasn't just another crime drama. It was a masterclass in storytelling, character development, and visual artistry. Think about it. A high school chemistry teacher, diagnosed with cancer, decides to cook meth to secure his family's future. Sounds simple, right? But what unfolded was anything but. The show dared to ask, what happens when a good man, pushed to his limits, starts to embrace his darker side? And more importantly, can he ever truly go back? The writing was meticulous. Every plot point, every line of dialogue felt earned. The cinematography was breathtaking, turning the New Mexico landscape into a character itself. And the acting? Bryan Cranston as Walter White, Aaron Paul as Jesse Pinkman. Their performances were nothing short of legendary. They brought these complex, often morally ambiguous characters to life in a way that made us, the audience, feel every triumph and every crushing defeat. It wasn't just entertainment, it was an experience. It challenged us, made us uncomfortable, and forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature. But Walter White wasn't alone in his descent. His choices rippled outwards, forever altering the lives of everyone in his orbit. And it's those transformations we need to explore next. Walter White's transformation wasn't a solo act. It was a gravitational pull, drawing everyone around him into his increasingly dark orbit. And perhaps no one felt that pull more acutely than Jesse Pinkman. From a former student and small-time dealer, Jesse was thrust into a world of high-stakes crime, a world he was never truly equipped for. His journey is a tragic one, marked by a constant struggle between his inherent morality and the brutal realities of the meth empire. We saw him try to escape, to find a semblance of normalcy, only to be dragged back in by Walt's manipulation, his desperation, or simply the sheer weight of their shared history. Think about the emotional toll. The guilt, the fear, the moments of fleeting hope crushed by overwhelming despair. His relationship with Walt was a twisted father-son dynamic, a bond forged in crime and ultimately shattered by betrayal. The death of Jane, a pivotal moment, wasn't just a tragedy for Jesse. It was a stark illustration of Walt's chilling capacity for calculated cruelty, a moment where the line between Walter White and Heisenberg blurred irrevocably. There's Skyler White, Walt's wife, who initially stood as a moral compass, a symbol of the life Walt claimed to be protecting. Her journey is one of gradual, agonizing compromise. From suspicion to complicity, we witnessed her moral boundaries erode, forced to become an accessory to her husband's crimes, to launder his dirty money, and to construct elaborate lies to protect her family. Her breakdown wasn't just emotional, it was a complete shattering of her identity, a woman trapped in a nightmare of her husband's making. She tried to fight back, to escape, but Walt's grip was too strong, his influence too pervasive. Her desperate attempts to save her family, even if it meant sacrificing her own integrity, are a testament to the destructive power of Walt's ambition. And what about Hank Schrader, Walt's brother-in-law and a DEA agent? The irony is almost unbearable. Hank, the dedicated lawman, tirelessly pursuing the very criminal mastermind living under his nose. His unwavering commitment to justice, his relentless pursuit of Heisenberg, was a constant source of tension and dread. The slow, dawning realization that his own family member was the monster he hunted was a gut-wrenching revelation, leading to a confrontation that would forever alter the course of their lives. Hank's character represents the law, the order that Walt so gleefully dismantled, and his eventual fate underscores the brutal consequences of Walt's actions. Finally, we have Gus Fring, the calm, calculated, and utterly terrifying drug lord. Gus was the antithesis of Walt's initial bumbling persona, a man who built an empire with precision and ruthless efficiency. His mind games with Walt were a masterclass in psychological warfare, a constant dance of power and manipulation. Gus's cold, methodical approach to business and his chilling capacity for violence made him one of television's most iconic villains. He was a mirror, reflecting Walt's own burgeoning darkness, a glimpse into the kind of monster Walt was becoming. But even Gus, with all his power and control, underestimated the depths of Walt's desperation and cunning, leading to a fiery conclusion that left us all breathless. These characters, each irrevocably changed, serve as a stark reminder that in the world of Breaking Bad, no one escapes unscathed, and the ripple effects of one man's choices can devastate an entire world. But what about the empire Walt built and the chaos that followed? That's where our story continues. With Gus Fring out of the picture, Walter White, now fully embracing his Heisenberg persona, stood at the precipice of his own empire. This was the moment he had seemingly craved, the ultimate control, the undisputed kingpin. And for a time, he achieved it. The blue meth flowed, the money piled up, and Walt believed he was untouchable. He built a sophisticated operation, seemingly impervious to external threats, and even managed to pull off audacious feats like the train heist, showcasing his unparalleled ingenuity and ruthlessness. This period was a terrifying display of Walt's unchecked ambition. A man intoxicated by power and convinced of his own invincibility. He was no longer just cooking meth for his family. He was doing it because he was good at it, because it made him feel alive, powerful, and in control. Every empire, no matter how meticulously built, has its cracks. And for Walt, those cracks began to show, often from within. The very relationships he claimed to protect became the instruments of his downfall. The tension with Jesse, always simmering beneath the surface, escalated into outright hostility. Jesse, haunted by the ghosts of their past and the moral compromises he was forced to make, desperately sought an exit. His trauma, the weight of all the lives lost, and the horrors witnessed became unbearable. He was a broken man, manipulated and abused by the one person he once looked up to, a tragic figure caught in the wake of Walt's destructive path. The ultimate turning point, the seismic shift that shattered Walt's world, was the revelation to Hank. The moment Hank discovered Walt's true identity, sitting on that toilet, was a masterclass in slow burn tension and devastating payoff. It set in motion a chain of events that would lead to the show's most harrowing and unforgettable episode, Ozymandias. This episode wasn't just a climax, it was an unraveling, a brutal, relentless descent into chaos. The desert shootout, the gut-wrenching death of Hank, was a moment that left audiences stunned and heartbroken. It was the direct consequence of Walt's choices, the ultimate price paid for his hubris and his insatiable desire for power. The casual brutality of Hank's execution, the coldness with which it was carried out, underscored the true monster Heisenberg had become. From that moment on, Walt's empire crumbled. The money, once his ultimate goal, became worthless, scattered across the desert. His family, once his motivation, was now terrified of him, fractured beyond repair. The chaos of Ozymandias extended beyond Hank's death. It encompassed the complete destruction of Walt's life as he knew it. His home was invaded, his family threatened, and he was left utterly alone, stripped of everything he had built. Jesse, too, faced unimaginable torment, enslaved and forced to cook. The episode was a relentless barrage of loss and despair, a stark portrayal of the consequences of a life lived outside the law. It left us wondering, how could Walt possibly recover from this? What could possibly be left for him after such a catastrophic downfall? After the devastating events of Ozymandias, Walter White vanished, a ghost of his former self, stripped of his empire, his family, and his identity. But even in exile, the pull of his past, the need for some form of redemption or at least a final act of control, proved too strong. His return in the series finale, Felina, wasn't a triumphant comeback, but a somber, almost elegiac journey to tie up loose ends and confront the wreckage he had wrought. This was Walt making his final choices, not as the all-powerful Heisenberg, but as a dying man attempting to reconcile with the monster he had become. His last actions were a complex mix of self-serving motives and genuine, albeit twisted, attempts at atonement. He ensured his family would receive his remaining money, a final, desperate act to fulfill his initial, misguided purpose. He confronted the Schwartzes, not for revenge, but to secure his family's financial future through a clever, if still morally ambiguous, maneuver. And then there was his final, poignant encounter with Skyler, a confession that, for all his claims of doing it for family, he did it for himself. He liked it, he was good at it, and he was alive. This moment of raw honesty was a crucial piece of his complex legacy, a stark admission of the ego and ambition that truly drove him. The climax of Felina brought Walt face to face with the consequences of his actions, leading to a violent yet strangely cathartic conclusion. His meticulous planning, his scientific ingenuity, was put to use one last time, not for profit, but for revenge and a twisted sense of justice. The machine gun in the trunk, the ricin, the final confrontation with the white supremacists who had tormented Jesse and stolen his fortune. It was all part of Walt's elaborate, self-destructive swan song. And in his final moments, bleeding out in a meth lab, he found a strange kind of peace, surrounded by the tools of his trade, the symbols of his power and his downfall. It was an ending that felt both inevitable and deeply satisfying, a tragic but fitting conclusion to a five-season epic. But the legacy of Breaking Bad extends beyond Walt's final breath. It lives on in the indelible mark it left on television history, in its fearless exploration of morality, consequence, and the human capacity for darkness. And for Jesse Pinkman, his story continued in El Camino, a necessary epilogue that finally offered him a chance at freedom, a chance to escape the shadow of Heisenberg and forge his own path, however scarred. The show's emotional resonance, its ability to provoke thought and discussion, remains as potent today as it was a decade ago. It's a story that reminds us that even the most ordinary lives can harbor extraordinary darkness, and that the choices we make, no matter how small, can have devastating, far-reaching consequences. And that, perhaps, is why we're still obsessed. Because in the story of Walter White, we see a reflection of our own potential for both good and evil, and the enduring, terrifying question of what we might become when pushed to our absolute limits.